Diabetes Connections is brought to you by OneTouch. Every touch is a step forward. By Dexcom. Take control of your diabetes and live life to the fullest with Dexcom. And by Real Good Foods. Real food you feel good about eating.
This is Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
This week, a deep dive into mental health, burnout, depression, and feeling like a burden to others. Therapist Allison Nimlos, who lives with type 1, says consider turning that last one, the burden, around.
Think of it in reverse. If your spouse or your best friend or your brother was going through diabetes or just going through something really hard where they felt burdened, would you want to help them? And of course the answer is like, of course, I would want to help. I love them. And it's like, that's what love is. Love is wanting to help ease the burden.
Allison shares great advice and her own personal story. She was diagnosed at age 8. In Tell Me Something Good, a message about affordable insulin gets a World Series audience, thanks to a familiar name around here. This podcast is not intended as medical advice. If you have those kinds of questions, please contact your healthcare provider. Welcome to another week of Diabetes Connections. I'm your host, Stacey Sims. So glad to have you along. Halloween is this week, and it's been great to see some of your kids' pictures in the Facebook group. It's Diabetes Connections, the group, if you're not already there. And I posted a couple of weeks ago when we did an episode on Halloween, Maura McCarthy and I did a Dear D-Mom all about Halloween and how to handle all the candy and the running around and the costumes. And I had mentioned that Benny, my son, who was diagnosed right before he turned 2, was Flounder, from The Little Mermaid. My daughter was Ariel. And he was Flounder the year he was diagnosed. So about a month, 6 weeks before he was diagnosed was Halloween. And he was already exhibiting symptoms and he was so moody, and this poor kid, and he would go back and forth from being super excited to just breaking down and crying, and wanting to nap. I mean, the guilt you have when you look back and see those pictures. How did I not know? But we didn't know. And I posted the pictures of him as Flounder. That costume, man, that was the easiest costume ever. I mean, I had to buy it, but it was a zippy sweatshirt. And I had a hood, and he was a fish. That was it. It was perfect. And he wore that sweatshirt out. He wore it for, I think, almost an entire year. I mean, whenever he outgrew it or it fell apart is when he stopped wearing it. So continue to post your pictures of you in costume, of your kids in costume. Love to hear about how your Halloween went. I'll link up that D-Mom episode about Halloween in the show notes if you missed it, or just go back through your podcast player or at diabetes-connections.com. Also this week, though, coming up in Charlotte, we have Take Control of Your Diabetes. The TCOYD conference is this weekend. I'll be there with my book, The World's Worst Diabetes Mom. So excited to have my first local appearance with the book. And I just found out recently that Chris Rudin, he's not going to be at TCOYD, but he's going to be in Charlotte Friday night, the night before, with Eversense, the implantable CGM, doing an appearance for them. So I'm going to try to do a catch-up interview with Chris. Chris, of course, is a record-holding bodybuilder. He was on the Titan Games with The Rock earlier this year. And if you don't know the name, you probably know the picture. He has a prosthetic arm, and he was born with a shorter left arm, and he covered it up for years, even though he was bodybuilding with the shorter arm, and he would wear a glove. I mean, you've heard our episodes with him. If not, I'll link those up too. But Chris was diagnosed with type 1 at age 19, and he's just changed his life. I mean, for someone who tried to hide things and was very shy and in himself, he's probably one of the most downloaded people in our community. I mean, we're talking millions of people who have seen him now and heard his story. He's just also a really nice guy. So I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing him and catching up. He's always got something interesting cooking. And a little personal update, if you've been following our wrestling escapades. Benny's knee injury that I mentioned on the show and online has turned out to be an actual torn meniscus. Yeah, the doctor initially thought it was going to be something easy. We were just going to have to do some ice and elevation and weight, but we did an MRI, thankfully, and it is a torn meniscus. By the way, you got to take everything off for those MRIs. So we had a little pile of diabetes gear. We timed it. We were very fortunate to have enough time to plan. So we knew, it wasn't exact, but we didn't have to sacrifice any technology to the MRI. But it looks like surgery, looks like orthoscopic surgery later in November. He's not happy, but at the same time, he can't straighten his leg, so he can't wrestle. Man, wrestling's been so good for Benny. It has been a really wonderful entree into high school. He's got a great friend group, and the physical activity has been amazing. It just makes him happy. He's a kid who's happy when he's moving and busy, and these workouts have really just helped him feel good. And we finally figured out the blood sugar nonsense during most of the workouts. So I'm really hoping he can stay active. He did an upper body workout, carefully supervised, and the doctor says he can continue to do that. And I'm so thrilled that the team has been really accepting. The coach has been great. You're still on the team. Come to as many practices as you can. They're doing a fundraiser this weekend. Come to that. Participate as much as you can. So, he's still in the club, which I think as a freshman, don't tell him I said so, is really important. So hopefully we will, just like everything else, we'll get through this just fine. Because, like you, that's just how we do it. All right, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Dexcom. Do you know about Dexcom Clarity? It is their diabetes management software. And for a long time, I just thought it was something our endo used. You can use it on both the desktop or as an app on your phone. It's an easy way to keep track of the big picture. I check it about once a week. It really helps Benny and me dial back and see longer-term trends. And it helps us to not overreact to what happened for just one day or even just 1 hour. The overlay reports help put context to Benny's glucose levels and patterns. You can even share the reports with your care team, which makes appointments a lot more productive. Managing diabetes is not easy, but I feel like we have one of the very best CGM systems working for us. Find out more at diabetes-connections.com and click on the Dexcom logo. My guest this week was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at age 8. She is a licensed therapist. And in fact, her social media handle is the Diabetic Therapist. And she's a certified diabetes educator in training. I wanted to have Allison Nimlos on to talk about the mental toll diabetes can take, something she knows about firsthand. Now, please note, this is one of our extra interviews, one of our extra episodes. So there will be a longer bonus episode to follow, and that will be available as a transcript. All of these extra episodes, it's the last episode of the month throughout 2019. They are transcribed, and when you sign up for the newsletter, we send that to you. As soon as you sign up, you get a transcript, and then every month thereafter, one will follow. If you go to diabetes-connections.com, the sign up for the newsletter will just pop up, and I throw it in the group and on the page every once in a while on Facebook as well. So here's an excerpt of my talk with Allison Nimlos. Allison, thanks for being with me. I'm really interested to kind of see where this conversation goes. Thanks for making the time.
I am so happy to be here.
All right, before we jump in, and there are so many questions to ask, this is a very broad topic, and I want to get to your diabetes story as well. But what made you want to go into this field? Why become a therapist? Why focus on mental health?
So that's a great question. So when I was kind of going through my quarter life crisis back in my mid-20s, was trying to figure out what I really wanted to be when I grew up, I thought I wanted to be a diabetes educator. It was something that I had actually thought about on and off for many, many years. I actually even remember telling my dad when I was like 12 that I wanted to be a diabetes educator. And it sort of waxed and waned in my interest over the years. And I had been writing for Diabetes Mind for a couple of years, and I had really enjoyed being able to teach people about diabetes. And so I thought I wanted to be an educator and work with people on a one-on-one basis, not just write an article and hope it made an impact for somebody, because you just sort of put things up and you hope somebody resonates with it. You don't really know where it's going to go. I wanted to have more of that personal interaction with people. And so I had started pursuing prerequisites for, nursing or dietetics, kind of that normal, kind of the traditional normal path to becoming a diabetes educator. And as I was doing it, I realized it wasn't really speaking to why I wanted to be a diabetes educator, sort of just helping people learn to check their blood sugar, helping people, eat healthy. I wanted to help people really live and cope and thrive with diabetes, which I think motivates a lot of people who are in kind of the advocacy field anyways, which I had been doing for quite a while, just wanting to really inspire people and move people to have hope and feel like they can do anything. And so taking a look at kind of my core reasons, my why for why I wanted to be an educator, I started asking around with some other therapists that I knew who also worked with people with diabetes. And I said, this is kind of what I'm thinking about doing. And this is kind of why I want to do it. And they were really supportive. They thought, that could really make, a big impact. And it was right around the time where there was a lot of studies coming out about the psychosocial impact of diabetes and the mental health side of diabetes. It was just becoming more and more of the conversation at a lot of the large conferences, and research studies were coming out. And so it really just seemed like everybody was just starting to get it. I mean, it had always been a thing. It had always been an issue. I mean, mental health and diabetes has always been linked, but it was finally becoming a real big part of the conversation. And I thought, I think this is where I needed. And now, especially being a practicing therapist, so many people do say that how much they wish they had a therapist with diabetes, how much the life with diabetes, the shots or wearing an insulin pump or the 24/7-ness of diabetes, the impact on relationships, how much it really shapes who they are and how they wish they had somebody that they could talk to about that. I'm just seeing more and more evidence that this specialization is really needed, and I'm really excited to be a part of that. I wish there were more of me. I think there's like 12 of us, right? I mean, there's more than 12, but there are not a lot of therapists with diabetes, and there's not a lot of therapists who really specialize also in diabetes. They may have it, but it might not be something that they're super vocal about working with as a real specialty. I am still pursuing my CDE. I'm just going the very long route. I'm going through the unique qualifications pathway, which is much longer, but I do also want to be an educator. I want to do both because I really think that that's what people need. They need the education and they need the mental health support, and you can't separate them. They're inextricably linked in the life of someone with diabetes.
Sure. Well, let's talk about that, because I think that the biggest topic that seems to come up, the most obvious one for people who talk about trying to find a therapist or needing help with diabetes, it seems to be what everybody kind of refers to as burnout. Is it really burnout? I mean, where does somebody start if they think, I just don't want to do this another day?
Well, nobody really wants to do it another day. So it's really quite prevalent. Bill Polanski and Larry Fisher, they're out in California, have really spearheaded the research in this area. And so I've read a lot of their research and have met with them and talked with them about this. And from my perspective, I kind of take, maybe a unique or kind of sort of put my own stamp on the topic, in that I really see two things show up for people, or maybe even like a spectrum of things that show up for people in both the clients that I have worked with and also when I do speaking and just meet with people out in the community. There are two words that get thrown around, and that's diabetes distress and diabetes burnout. And if you read the research, if you read articles online, you'll see them used somewhat interchangeably, that they kind of mean the same thing, which is, and it goes from everywhere from, having just this frustration or anger or fatigue with living with diabetes, all the way to not actually managing diabetes anymore. And that can look like a lot of things too. I mean, that can be anywhere from not taking insulin as needed, or not testing blood sugar, or not wearing CGM, or ignoring the alarms. I mean, it looks like a lot. I mean, there is such a spectrum of how this shows up for people. So it's very individual. And I think that's one thing that I think people need to keep in mind, is just like your other mental health issues, anxiety and depression, those things can show up differently for different people. What symptoms people have, the root cause of anxiety is going to be different for everyone. So I think the same idea can apply to those dealing with diabetes burnout or diabetes distress. And so I've sort of put things into two buckets. When I give my talks, I talk about diabetes distress and diabetes burnout as kind of being their own things. Distress being more of the day-to-day emotional burden of living with diabetes, just being really frustrated with the roller coaster, maybe feeling angry that you are having to take time away from family or a social event, maybe feeling guilty or shame over the blood sugar reading that you're getting. And then if that persists, it can really lead to people really pushing away from their care because it becomes so distressing that you have to say, I don't want to do this anymore.
Mm.
And so I'm not going to. And people don't necessarily think that like consciously, that they're like, I'm just not going to take care of myself. Most of the time, it's a very subconscious reaction to what's going on that they just delay, like, they kind of, I'll bolus later, or, I'll check in a little bit. Like, I just don't want to do this right now. And so it starts showing up in their health behaviors. It starts showing up in, are they pre-bolusing? Are they testing? Are they, are they doing all of these things? And so, and then at the end of the day, 3-6 months later, they go in for their A1C and it's elevated from where it had been, and everyone's going, what happened? Mm. And it's really been this like slow progression that is really kind of insidious, that, you may not even know it because it just builds so gradually that you get to this point. And I think a lot of people, it is normal. Diabetes distress affects like half of people with diabetes at any given point. Like, it affects everybody, basically. But a lot of times I think people think that there's just nothing that you can do about it. Like, this is just diabetes. And so there can be kind of a hopelessness with resolving it in any meaningful way.
Well, I guess my question would be then, what do you do, right? How do you even recognize it's happening? And then once you see it, if it were as easy as, I just need to get back on track, right? Everybody would do it. Right back to Allison in a moment, but first, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by OneTouch. Handwriting your blood glucose levels is the ultimate throwback. The OneTouch VarioFlex meter seamlessly syncs with the free OneTouch Reveal mobile app to create your dynamic electronic logbook. And when you choose the OneTouch Reveal mobile app, you'll be joining thousands of other people living with diabetes. In fact, as of this past October, OneTouch Reveal was the #1 downloaded diabetes management app in the US, Canada, France, and the UK. To upgrade today to the OneTouch VarioFlex meter and OneTouch Reveal mobile app, visit diabetes-connections.com and click on the OneTouch logo. Now back to Allison talking about her strategies to get back on track.
First of all, there needs to be a greater awareness among, I think, our healthcare providers for recognizing distress and burnout. I think that is a big conversation topic that is missing when we go in for our appointments. I can't recall a time when I've had an endocrinologist or a nurse practitioner ask me, how am I doing mentally with this balancing life and diabetes? Sometimes it can be validating as far as my A1C, goes up a little bit. Oh, well, you're a new mom and that sort of thing. Like, they can sometimes just sort of recognize that this is a transition point in my life. But as far as actually doing any kind of assessment or really having that conversation of educating people that distress and burnout are real things that people with diabetes experience. I think if more people had the language to describe what they're going through and to know kind of ahead of time, this is something that could happen. This is something that's likely to happen because of the nature of the disease. I think people would be much more readily able to reflect on their experience and then say, hey, I think that is what I'm going through. I need to reach out to either my healthcare provider or I need to reach out to a therapist or a psychologist because this is something that needs to be taken care of so that it doesn't negatively impact my emotional well-being and my physical well-being.
One thing that interests me as the parent of a child with type 1 is that I often have gotten comments from very well-meaning friends who say things like, well, it's great that he's so used to it. It'll always just be part of his life. He's fine. He'll grow up and he'll be used to it. And I worry a lot about Benny certainly, who's 14 now, but about adults with type 1 who've lived with it either since childhood or were diagnosed as adults. And there just seems to be this perception that, they're over it. They got it. But that's not the case, right? You can have the diabetes distress and burnout at any age.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it doesn't just go away if it's not taken care of, if it's not addressed. It's not really going to just fade. Research shows how persistent it can be if it's not really tackled head on. And I think it can kind of wax and wane a little bit, but it's pretty persistent as far as what they're seeing through, interviewing people. And yeah, I think going back to what you're saying about growing up with type 1 diabetes, I think that there is this idea that it becomes normal or it's not a big deal anymore. And the truth is that diabetes changes the way that, going through puberty, it changes, physiologically, there's changes, but then relationally, when you get older, going into college, like your entire social structure changes. Your parents aren't there anymore and you're on your own for everything. So not only are you having to worry about paying rent and paying bills, but you're also having to remember to like go to the pharmacy and learn how to check your insurance benefits and all these things. And it is, more kind of to-dos. And then you have a whole new set of people that you're introducing your diabetes to. If you've grown up, then you might almost forget that you have to introduce it to people because you've gone through elementary and middle and high school. At least that's what it was for me. Everyone knew by the time I graduated from high school that I had diabetes. I didn't even have to introduce it anymore. But then you go to college. Once I graduated from college, I moved across the country. So again, the whole transition and the whole, kind of upheaval of your life happens, especially in your 20s, fairly regularly as you're kind of establishing yourself and establishing like your own circle of, new friends in your work and romantic relationships and your own children. And so it keeps going. And so diabetes continues to evolve, not so much in that, the disease is changing, but the way that it kind of shows up and impacts your life changes. And those things can be stress points for people. And if you're not getting support to kind of go through all of that, it's really hard. And it can sometimes feel like you're being diagnosed all over again because you're going through these changes.
I know one of your specialties is that path to independence, that transitional time from teenage to college to, living on your own. Can we talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, I love it. I love talking to parents, whether I'm coaching them or, doing family counseling. I think it's such an important topic because, again, I think up until recently, there weren't a lot of structures in place to help teenagers and parents navigate that very unique transition because taking ownership of diabetes is much different than taking ownership of your homework. There are different consequences to that. Or, starting to do like your own laundry is different than ordering your own diabetes supplies or learning how to change your own basal rates and things like that. So I think families need a lot of support and education as far as like what to look for, because this is not something that is going to show up in like Parent Magazine. As far as like how to guide your kids to independent management is not going to be an article in Good Housekeeping. So.
Well, and let's just jump in and answer some of those questions if you don't mind. So what are some things that parents should be doing and can do to help out with this transition?
Well, I think that's such a big question. I think there's two things that immediately come to mind as far as the questions that I get most often is when to start and what to allow kids to start doing. And so I kind of say, start early and go slowly, that you can start asking and kind of gauging interest and maturity level as early as like 10, 11, 12 years old. But you need to obviously give over full control much, much slower than you would other tasks, just because of the seriousness of the tasks that you're giving over. And I think that's where a lot of parents can, they don't do it intentionally, but I think that's where parents and teens can find themselves getting into a lot of that kind of the DKA scares and things like that. And that teens, 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, maybe want to because they want their parents to stop asking them about their diabetes. They're like, yeah, I'll just do it. I know how to do this. I've been doing this since I was 6. This is easy. And then they do it. And then they kind of go through their own burnout distress because there's a lot going on when you're a teenager, and they can have a hard time with the management and kind of the forethought and the reactivity that diabetes requires when they're also balancing peer pressure and liking a guy or a girl, whatever, there's a lot of distractions when you're a teen, wanting to impress somebody, focusing on your sports. And it's not that they won't ever be able to do it, but their brain development just isn't there yet to be able to kind of cope with everything. That's why you see kids who struggle with like remembering to bring their homework or remembering to bring their lunch or their instrument. Like kids are always forgetting things. When you forget things related to diabetes, though, that's a lot more serious than forgetting your English essay. So it's not that parents should completely hold on to everything and say, no, you're not allowed to. I'm going to do everything, because that also sets the kid up for not developing the skills at all. But it's this real dance of giving a little, but watching and communicating and assessing your kid, because your kid is going to be very different than someone else's kid, as far as their readiness, their maturity, their brain development, even what the devices that they're using are going to require different skills, different management. Start early, of introducing kids to concepts and demonstrating and showing them, this is how you call the pharmacy. This is what you say. Like, I'm not expecting you right now to go and do this on your own, but I want you to be watching. Just like I'm going to demonstrate other things that they have to learn. You demonstrate first, and then you let them try it out while you're watching. And then eventually you watch a little bit less as time goes on until they're, either 18 or 20 or 22. I don't think there's necessarily like a complete cutoff. In fact, I actually advocate against that. I think that part of burnout is that abandonment that adults feel like, I have to do absolutely everything for diabetes completely on my own, and I am tired of it. I'm not necessarily in favor of a complete, especially not all in one get-go. I think it needs to be done really carefully, really slowly, and it needs to be done kind of on the terms of the individual with diabetes, and they may want more or less support than someone else. And I think that's great. I think that flexibility is really needed to match the personality of each person.
How hard is it for an adult to reach out and ask for help? Somebody, like yourself, very capable. You're a mom of a toddler. You're working. You're busy. And I imagine you're not running around saying, I really need more help, even if you might. I mean, it's hard to ask for help without diabetes. How do you talk to people about, saying, you can't do this all on your own. It's okay to share the burden. It's got to be difficult.
Yeah, it is. It is. That's a piece of self-talk that I work with a lot of my, counseling and coaching clients all together, is this idea of being a burden. It's a prevalent narrative, I think, as you grow up, is you're a lot of work. I think because we see it, it's like, we think it's a lot of work. And why would anybody want to do this? Or I don't want to give this over to somebody else. I've met so many young adults who are worried about getting into a romantic relationship because they're worried about the burden of diabetes. So I think for me, it was a lot of, I don't know if there was necessarily a moment in time where I became like a revelation. I don't think it was like a light bulb moment, but I think just evolving to the point where you could see how reaching out to those who are particularly close to you. So you don't necessarily need to feel like I'm going to just ask strangers or anything like that. I think starting with those who are closest to you, because those are relationships where as humans, we want to help ease the burden of those that we love. I often ask my clients to think of it in reverse. Like if your spouse or your best friend or your brother was going through diabetes or just going through something really hard where they felt burdened, would you want to help them? And of course the answer is like, of course I would want to help. I love them. And it's like, that's what love is. Love is wanting to help ease the burden that somebody is experiencing. And so if you are secure and confident in that relationship, then that is an interaction that you can really invest in. And I think being able to see how the sharing of burden really can actually enhance the intimacy and closeness of a relationship, it makes me more open to, inviting my husband to get me a juice box or to tell him what my A1C is, because I know if I'm excited about something, he's going to be excited about it. And I know he wants to be in on it so that he understands what my experience is and can be emotionally supportive, or vice versa. If when he goes the other direction and I'm sad about it, he wants to be able to comfort me because that's why he's there, right? Like that's why you get in these relationships, is to be able to be supportive. And so understanding that diabetes is just like that, that for me is something that has helped as a mom and as a wife and friend and daughter, having that relationship and knowing that that's why they're there. That's the purpose of those relationships. It's not just to have a good time, but it's really to be able to be a support for each other. And this is one of the areas where we most need support. And our experience will show that. I mean, there's research to show it, but you don't need research to know that you need support with diabetes.
You're listening to Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
More to come with therapist Allison Nimlos in our bonus episode in just a couple of days. And as she continues on what is in the next episode, we'll be talking about her diagnosis as a kid and how that's influenced her help of other people today. And also, we talk about emotional attachment to numbers, right? We all know there's no such thing as a good number, but how hard is it to really put that into practice? So she will talk about that and much more in our bonus episode. Time for Tell Me Something Good. And I've got a couple more from our Facebook group, Diabetes Connections, the group, but also a story that ran during the World Series. Did you catch this? Tell Me Something Good is brought to you by Real Good Foods. Have you tried them yet? They are available in Walmart. So easy. Just go to the freezer section and grab it. You can start with the breakfast sandwiches or the pizza. I mean, the pizza is really what started it all. The poppers. Everything is low carb, high in protein. And if you go to their website, they have what they call pro tips and recipes. Every item is so easy to prepare, but they do have little tips and tricks that make them even better. I think I shared before that my husband puts the cauliflower crust pizza in a frying pan. I bake it, but he likes it that way. So, you can always do different things and either dress these things up or eat them exactly as they come, and they are delicious. I still need to get that air fryer. I'm reading it on the website right now, and that air fryer, I got to get that because I hear it's not only a game changer for the Real Good Foods, but, for everything else in your kitchen. And I love a new gadget. All right, go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Real Good Foods logo to learn more. Tell Me Something Good this week. Couple of more submissions in the Facebook group. Carrie writes, 7 months after diagnosis, and my 4-year-old daughter got her Omnipod today. And her first pod alarm, but that's another story. And she put a, smiley emoji there. Carrie, thanks for writing in. I hope that your 4-year-old is adjusting really well to that. And please post in the group if you keep getting alarms. There's a lot of strategies that people can share that can help. And Peter wrote, I just have a little Tell Me Something Good. Had my feet checked today, which hasn't been done for 4 years. I've been overseas, etc. The podiatrist couldn't believe I have been type 1 35 years and had the most healthy of feet. Great skin, great pulse, etc., etc. Keep on top of those feet checks, friends. Peter, thank you so much. And I just have to share a funny little story as you listen. Benny at summer camp, at regular summer camp this summer, and I may have shared this, they were very concerned because he had a blister. I mean, a pretty big blister, but it wasn't infected. It wasn't not healing or anything. He just had a blister. And they made him soak his feet. They called me and made me promise to take him to a podiatrist because, of course, type 1 diabetes, average person, even the average medical person, doesn't really understand. And they were very concerned. All they knew was diabetes and feet. They couldn't possibly have been thinking about diabetic neuropathy. He's 14 years old, super healthy, great A1Cs, and had healthy feet. But I promised them. Of course, I didn't take him to the podiatrist, but I did take him to our endocrinologist for his regular checkup in August. And I mentioned it, and I said, do you want to look at his feet? And he laughed, and he looked at Benny. He said, is your blister healed? He said, yes, it's fine. And he told us, I have to do 1 foot check when or before you turn 18. I can't remember if it's right after or right before. But for insurance and medical files, he's got to do a foot check of his pediatric endocrinology patients. But other than that, things have changed so much. And no disrespect, Peter, you're diagnosed 35 years ago. I mean, the tools, to have the health that you have, you must have worked your tuchus off to be doing so well. All respect. And yes, we do have to take care of every part of our body. So if you're at all concerned about your child's feet, or you think what I'm saying is ridiculous, definitely check with your endo. Don't forget, I am the world's worst diabetes mom. So, you can definitely take it to your medical professionals. The other story I wanted to make sure to include in Tell Me Something Good is about a commercial that ran during one of the World Series games last week. It's from Patients for Affordable Drugs. And Lauren Stanford is the community organizing director. If that's a familiar name, that is because Lauren is Maura McCarthy's daughter, Maura McCarthy Stanford, who is, of course, my dope D-Mom. She comes on every month and we do our Dear D-Mom segment, and a good friend and an incredible advocate, a tireless advocate, and an author and a travel writer and a journalist. But Lauren has gone to work for this great organization, Patients for Affordable Drugs. They are the only independent national patient organization focused exclusively on achieving policy change to lower the price of prescription drugs. And they don't accept funding from organizations that profit from the development and distribution of prescription drugs. I am reading right off of their website. So it was so exciting when Maura posted that this commercial was going to run. As she said, Lauren is the brains behind it. Here's a clip.
My insulin used to cost $26 a vial. Today, drug companies charge up to $350 a vial. This is the same insulin formula I've been using for almost 30 years. There is no reason for it to be this expensive. Now there are bipartisan proposals in Washington that would actually lower drug prices. It would be an historic moment. Mr. President and Congress, we are counting on you.
I will link up more about the Patients for Affordable Drugs because you can see the featured stories that are on their website. You can learn more. You can donate. One of the things that I think is great is they have a solutions tab on their website, because I think for many of us, it's easy to say, yeah, we want insulin to cost less and we want more affordable drugs. But then how do we get there? And they have a great beginning about finding solutions on their website. Just things to read. You don't have to agree with all of it. I know this is a complicated issue and we all have different ideas, but I would urge you to check it out. And then, man, let's keep our eyes on Lauren Stanford because she is just killing it, doing great work, doing good work, and really continuing to make a difference. And this is a kid, she's not my kid, but I'm going to brag on her, who has been really pushing for change since she was a kid. She went to Children's Congress as a child. And we've talked to her on the show. She said it really put her on a path to wanting to push for change. And it's amazing to see how she is now doing so. So kudos to you, Lauren. And I'll give a little kudos to Maura, too. Way to go, Mom. Love you guys. If you have a Tell Me Something Good story, it doesn't have to be a national commercial that you planned to help make a difference in the world. It can be as easy as an inset change that a child did for the first time, a diaversary, anything that makes you feel good. Email, post it in the Facebook group, ping me on social media, but tell me something good. I mentioned at the top of the show that TCOYD was this weekend. That's the Take Control of Your Diabetes conference here in Charlotte, my town. It's also going to be my first local appearance with my book, With the World's Worst Diabetes Mom. I've been getting some amazing reviews. I will link them up. I've been posting a little in the Facebook group, but it does feel a little weird to be pushing and saying and self-promoting and all this stuff, but I'm going to have to because that's how you get noticed for the book. But I'm so thrilled that it has been well received so far. And it comes out on November 3rd. It's not even out yet, which I have to keep pinching myself to remember because I have been selling it. It's been selling really well for a book that isn't on Amazon yet. You can go to diabetes-connections.com to purchase your copy. If you wait, it will be on Amazon, like I said. The paperback, it's the same paperback that's available now that will be available on Amazon, but there will also be an ebook and shortly thereafter, the audiobook. If you are one of the people who pre-ordered it and has already read it, please head on over to Amazon or even Goodreads when it's out there on the 3rd and put a review in if you liked it. If you didn't like it, you don't have to tell anybody that you even read it. Donate it to the library or something. But if you liked it, give a review. And, I'd love to hear more about what you think. All right. Thank you, as always, to my editor, John Buchanan from Audio Editing Solutions. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Stacey Sims. I'll see you back here next week.
Quick disclosure, at times I may mention Tandem Diabetes Care. However, I am not compensated by Tandem for my actions, and Tandem does not support or control this content. I have created the content, and it is based on my personal experiences and observations.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Sims Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.